In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit.
Amen.
Christ is in our midst. This morning's Gospel follows right on the heels of the Gospel that we would have heard last Sunday had we not celebrated the Dormition, the Feast of the Dormition instead. So I'll read that as well, because it also goes along with the Gospel that we heard at Orthodox yesterday morning before the chanting workshop started. The Gospel from last Sunday was also from Matthew chapter 14. When Jesus heard it, he departed from there by boat to a deserted place by himself. But when the multitudes heard it, they followed him on foot from the cities. And when Jesus went out, he saw a great multitude, and he was moved with compassion for them and healed their sick. When it was evening, his disciples came to him, saying, "This is a deserted place, and the hour is already late. Send the multitudes away, that they may go into the villages and buy themselves food." But Jesus said to them, "They do not need to go away. You give them something to eat." And they said to him, "We have here only 5 loaves and 2 fish." He said, "Bring them here to me." Then he commanded the multitudes to sit down on the grass, and he took the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, and looking up to heaven, he blessed and broke and gave the loaves to the disciples, and the disciples gave to the multitudes. So they all ate and were filled, and they took up 12 baskets full of the fragments that remained. Now those who had eaten were about 5,000 men, besides women and children. Immediately Jesus made his disciples get into the boats and go before him to the other side, while he sent the multitudes away, and then continues the gospel that we just heard. After this gospel, just a few days later, maybe a week later, Jesus again is with the multitude, healing the sick and teaching them, and again they are hungry. And this time, with 7 loaves and a few fish, he feeds the multitudes of thousands and thousands who are sitting there with him. It's really a beautiful picture of the church that we have in those 2 Gospels, and really a beautiful picture of our lives in between, as we heard the Gospel this morning with Jesus walking on the water in the troubled seas towards the disciples. It's odd, interesting, I suppose. I am in my age, I'm of the age where Facebook came about, right? And I know that a lot of the younger kids don't really use it anymore, and some of those who are a little bit older might not use it either, I don't know. But interestingly enough, this week, it happened to be a picture popped up in one of these internet memes with a picture of a young gentleman running away from a bull, I'm assuming during the running of the bulls, and it made it look like he was running on water, right? And the picture is taken at just the right time, with the bull running behind him, about to go into the water after him, and this young man having just taken the first step out before he fell into the water. And the caption on it says, only Jesus, Peter, and this gentleman's name, which I'm sure was not his correct name. So whatever it was, only Jesus, Peter, and John, let's call him, have walked on water. But only John has a picture to prove it. And, of course, if you look at the picture, you realize he was about to fall in the water with the bull running after him into the water as well. So not really a safe place to be. But there's actually probably a good lesson to be learned there. One of which is that when we try to walk on water in fear, it doesn't do us much good. Peter, when he saw Jesus walking across the water, asked him to invite him out to come to him. And Jesus, in the midst of this storm, walking calmly across the water, bid him to come to me. And Peter, in his first response, in his response of love, came out and walked across the water. I grew up in, as many of you know, a Protestant church, and for whatever reason, we always grew up thinking only Jesus walked across water. When, of course, in reality, we see that Peter walks on the water as well. And yet, once his love turns into fear, he starts to sink. He gets afraid of those things that are around him. He loses sight and loses focus on the one who is before him. And in losing that sight and losing that focus on Christ, he falters and he falls into water. Thanks be to God that Jesus is there to pick him up again, and to call him to him once again, and to bring him safely out of the water and back into the boat. Yet also in our lives, we sometimes think that maybe with a little bit of fear behind us, we can accomplish these great things. And yet, throughout our lives, it's really by focusing on the one in front of us, not the thing behind us, that helps us to be and to see where it is that we're going. To focus on Christ brings us to step out in faith and to walk on the water, like Peter did first. To not fall short or not fall down by looking behind and thinking in fear of that which is around us. And there are always storms around us. And that then brings me to the Gospels that surround this one in many ways. The feeding of the 5,000 beforehand and the feeding of the 4,000 afterwards. That there, in the midst of Christ, is the church. There where he comes to heal. There where he comes to heal and to feed those who are hungry. And I talked about this a little bit yesterday after the Orthodox Gospel as well, as we heard the daily Gospel yesterday that we read during Orthodox, where we heard that the feeding of the 4,000. But this morning as well, these people have come out to see Jesus. They've come out with their eyes focused on the one who brings them healing. They come out and there recognize their hunger. Recognize that they need something. And the disciples recognize this as well. Say, Lord, what are we going to do? We need to send them home. Let's send them home. They're going to get antsy. They're going to get aggravated. They're going to get upset. They're going to get loud. It's going to be noisy. Let's just get rid of them now. And Jesus says, no, you get them something to eat. It's a pretty tall order. And yet, with just a few loaves of bread, 5 in this case, and a few fish, Jesus takes it, blesses it, breaks it, and gives it to his disciples and says to them, go and distribute it to those around you. And with those few loaves and those few fish, he feeds not just 5,000, but 5,000 and their families. He feeds that noisy and boisterous crowd and calls them to be with him. And he heals them. Heals them not just of their physical infirmities, which he had been doing, but heals them of their spiritual infirmities as well. Helps them to see that without him, they are hungry. But with him, the bread of life, they are filled. And then he goes away to a quiet place for a little while, as we're wont to do. Life, even in the church, can be noisy. It can be aggravating, it can be frustrating, it can be aggravating, it can be whatever around us. And so sometimes, too, we need to go off to a quiet place, as Jesus did. And yet, coming down from there, that's when he goes and he walks to the disciples across the water and calls them out to him, calls Peter out to him. So let us also recognize, as we come to church, that we are to come, and we do come, hungry. We come hungry that we might be filled with the bread of life. That we might be filled with the one who says, take, eat, this is my body. Take, drink, this is my blood. And calls us to him in love. Calls us out of the boat, even in that stormy sea, in faith. That if we keep our eyes on him, perfecter of our faith, we too might continue that walk of faith across the water. So let us give thanks to God for the bread that he gives to us. Not just the bread on our table at homes, but the heavenly bread, the heavenly manna that he gives to us here in his body and blood. And let us look and keep our eyes focused on him in front of us, that we might in faith weather the storms that are around us. And that we in faith might indeed walk on the water. Not falling down as we look back in fear at what's behind us, like Peter, or like this gentleman running away from the bulls, but rather to keep our eyes focused on Christ, who is the perfecter of our faith, who is the giver of life, that we too might have the life that he has given to us, that we might give glory and praise to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit, unto the ages of ages.